Excellent. So let's begin. And for those of you who just joined in, feel free to use the chat function to network with people, throw in what your company is, what your startup does, what you're doing, and how people can help you. And it may not be related to finding a regular job. Maybe you need help with raising funding, connecting with VCs, finding some vendors and suppliers, etc.
Morning.
All right. So for those of you who are wondering who I am, my name is Corey Hiramoto. I'm the founder of CareerShakers.com. We are a career transition coaching service. And so I started this company about 6 years ago, around the same time that I myself switched careers. So I used to do management consulting, and then I decided to switch careers because I wasn't getting a whole lot of joy and fulfillment out of it. And I decided to get into corporate recruiting. And right now I work for one of the big tech companies in the Bay Area. I've done both non-tech and technical recruiting. And I also help people with career coaching. And my specialty area is just like I did, helping people switch careers, or in some cases, switch industries. And in maybe your case, switching back into a corporate job from doing your own startup. So I've been coaching for 6 years now, and I've basically helped clients in all of the different corporate functions, which is what I specialize in. So marketing, finance, sales, engineering, product management, program management, legal, HR, etc. That's my area of expertise. I'm not super familiar with other industries like healthcare or nonprofits or construction. So I'm mostly focused in the corporate space. And I've pretty much touched every industry. I'm based in the San Francisco Bay Area, so of course tech, but I've also helped people move into different industries like biotech, higher education, CPG, fashion, you name it. And that is my background. And we do have a YouTube channel. It's just Career Shakers, all one word. I do post weekly career content there as well. And it covers the full spectrum of everything you may need from career services, like resume tips, interview tips, general executive coaching, salary negotiations, and things like that. Now, for those of you who are wondering, why should I listen to this guy? Or is this even possible? Or how can I possibly do this? Well, we've actually helped people transition roles, careers before. And you can find all these testimonials on my company website, careershakers.com. But I've helped people transition from HR to marketing. I've helped people move from like a more of a sales role to marketing, from finance to operations. The last one is pretty interesting. He wanted to switch into operations because he wanted a job where he had a lot more international travel, and he wasn't getting that in his regular job. And so he was actually able to make the switch, and he's been traveling now to Europe a few times a year. He's gone to South America a few times a year, and he's been able to find a job that he truly loves. So yes, we have helped people switch industries, careers, back into corporate. I've even helped mothers returning back to work, all those great things. Now, before we go any further, we're going to talk a little bit about how the format is going to work today. And so I don't want this to feel like a lecture. I feel like no one likes school. Some of us have been to college, and those lecture things, it doesn't feel great. I want it to be interactive. And so I will have the chat up at all times. You can also feel free to come off mute if you would like. And I'll be checking the chat at the end of every slide or so to make sure that I'm answering all the questions, getting everything answered that all of you absolutely need. I will be talking about what our agenda is going to cover in about 2 slides here, but feel free to utilize the chat function, come off mute. I wanted this to be as interactive and engaging for everyone as possible. Nobody likes lectures, right? All right, so let's just start with a very, very quick pop quiz. And I want everybody to be 100% honest here and use the chat function. Why did all of you, or why did you in particular, choose to start a business? Why did you choose to start a business? And sometimes there could be multiple of these things, but I am always curious to see what was the true driving factor behind everyone's decision to open their own business, create a startup. There's a lot of B, number B, doing what you love, being your own boss. Love it. Of course, come on. Who doesn't want to get rich, right? Maybe one of you will have the next Amazon, the next Facebook, the next Google, the next Apple. Oh, education. You started your own business for education. So my understanding or my interpretation of that would be you wanted to learn what it's like to run a business, be an entrepreneur, wear multiple hats, work in different functions. Ooh, working with family. Excellent. Now, I think all of these are very good and valid reasons as to why anybody would want to start a business. And I think this is probably a good reminder as to why you started, but also a good reason to think about your motivations if you want to continue working on this business, or even if you're thinking about potentially quitting or taking a break. And why I want everybody to start with this before we get into all the content and the tips and tricks and things like that for today's webinar is because I want you to have this goal in the back of your mind. And I also want to hopefully maybe shift your perspective as well, that this can also be achieved if you have a regular job as well. Now, I saw a lot in the chat that people were putting C, being their own boss, which I think is it's very freeing, right? You have a lot of freedom. You can manage your own schedule. You can work from everywhere. There's a lot of really great perks as to being your own boss. But also, maybe potentially you wanted to be your own boss because in your previous corporate job, you had a boss that was not so great. And it kind of ruined the experience for you as to having a job. And you feel like if you go somewhere else, you're just going to have another crappy boss and you're not going to be very happy. But I want to hopefully give you a different perspective today that you can actually achieve all four of these things by getting a regular job if you wanted to. Doesn't mean that you have to. It's not the only way to do it, but there's multiple options to achieve the goals that you would like. And I think it's good to kind of talk about this. And I think it's great that the 26, 25 of you are here today because I don't want to be the bearer of bad news and please don't shoot the messenger. But unfortunately, 90% of startups will fail. Now, as this picture says, I'm not trying to crush your hopes and dreams here, but I also want to just talk a little bit about the math and the statistics about it, because you should be aware that there is a rather high percentage that the startups may or may not work out. And it's always good to have a second backup plan or another option to support yourself, support your family, and maybe achieve some of those goals that we talked about on the very first slide. Someone is asking, how can you get rich on a job, job? I'll actually be talking about some salary and compensation ranges in the Bay Area, but you can actually make some very good money working for corporations, especially if you're working at some of the top corporations in whatever industry or field that you are in. They all tend to pay pretty great in their respective labor markets. And this is a great quote that I love from Winston Churchill, which is, he who fails to plan, plans to fail. He who fails to plan plans to fail. And that's just kind of one thing I want to bring up, because stats do show 90% of startups will unfortunately not make it. And so it's always good to have a second option or thinking about an exit opportunity if it arises. And we're all here to be proactive. We're all here to learn, educate, position ourselves in a better place. Doesn't mean that I'm wishing you ill will. I think there's a lot of great things that can happen out of a startup. Maybe you'll be on Shark Tank one day and we'll all get to buy your product and it'll be amazing. You'll get to work with Mark Cuban or Damon. Who knows? I'd love to see you all on Shark Tank as well. But it's also good to have another plan just in case it doesn't work. And as we're going to talk about, you don't have to quit entirely. You could just maybe take a temporary job or take a break, get a corporate job, wait for market timings to get better, wait until you can line up a better distributor or a better vendor, or find a way to reduce the cost, fix the business model, get another business partner. There's a lot of reasons why you may want to take a break and then come back and restart your startup later on. There is a cap on your income as an engineer, but it's pretty high, which I can tell you as a tech recruiter. All right, so today, what are we going to be talking about? Today, we're going to be talking about when you should potentially quit, take a break from your startup. How do you know when it's the right time? How do you do it without having so much regret? Which is something I hear from people that I coach all the time, is what if I quit too early and I was just 1 month away from making a big breakthrough. Maybe some of you have seen those memes or those videos on like Instagram and TikTok, right? There's the person with the pickaxe and the shovel trying to find diamonds, and he's so close, but he doesn't know it, and he just turns around and he gives up. And then there's the person next to him who just has perseverance and just keeps going, and eventually they find that diamond, right? And it's very similar to maybe you've heard stories about people moving to LA or New York to be actors, and they were, 1 day away from quitting, and they decided to go one more day, and then now they're in, Parks and Rec, and now they're in the office, and that's how their career was made. It's possible that that could happen, but hopefully, I'll give you some things to think about. That way, you can be very comfortable making the switch out of your startup if you wanted to. Now, if you are thinking about now taking a break, which job is actually best for you? How can you best position yourself to get a job right away? And then how do you overcome some objections that you're going to have as a CEO? As someone had already mentioned, your job title, when you put it on your resume, could be a barrier for some of you. And how can you actually address concerns from hiring managers? And how can you actually get hired? Okay, look at this. If you are lucky with your startup, you can make millions or maybe billions of dollars. That is extremely rare in a job. Not so much, actually. Like if you're a very senior, like a principal level engineer, whether that's on the software side or the hardware side these days, if you're in machine learning, I think I just saw an article last night, OpenAI, all of their engineers start at 900,000 a year. So, in like large tech companies, it's not unusual for principal level folks to make close to $1 million a year. And that's like guaranteed money, right? Liquid income. You can sell your shares. So there's pretty good money. Now, of course, if you want to be a billionaire like Jeff Bezos and own a yacht and send people to Mars, buy the moon, yeah, you probably will not become a billionaire working in a corporation. But if that's your goal, I guess there's probably not many other ways that you could do that other than being or running your own business. But again, there's only like I don't know how many billionaires are there in the world. Probably like less than 100. So, but yeah, if that's your goal is to be a billionaire, I yeah probably will not be able to do it with a regular job And if there's anything that you thought I was going to cover but is not on this agenda right now, feel free to put it in the chat and I'll make sure that we have time for that at the end for Q&A. Okay, so how do we know when to potentially quit or take a break from our startup without having regret? Which is the biggest concern that everybody is going to have, right? What if I quit too early? What if I was so close? I don't want to live with that regret. So I'm going to stick it out. Now, before I get into the how and the why you should be doing this, there is a very important thing that I want everybody to know, and that is if there is a graph or if there was a way to predict the perfect time to quit your startup, which obviously no one will ever know that, right? It's like being able to predict the market or anything like that, right? There's no perfect way to find the best ideal time to quit, but let's just say there was, okay? Hypothetically there was. It is way better to quit slightly too early than too late. I'll say it again. It is better to quit your startup a little too early than too late. It's better to quit when your startup is gaining traction or doing well, but there's going to be some other signs that you're going to see in a moment here. It's better to quit a little too early than a little too late. I know everyone has the fear of regret, but when you're looking to get a job, it's way, way easier if you quit a little too early. The reason is it's a far better story to tell. It's easier to interview, it's easier to write your resume when your startup was doing well or you were making progress towards something and then you decided to get a corporate job, as opposed to you ran out of funding, your startup straight up failed, you are now desperate for a job, you got to pick any job that comes your way just so you can support your family, right? You don't want to be under those constraints, and also it's a harder sell to hiring managers because of course they're going to ask you, oh, I saw you were running your own business for the last 3 years, Why are you trying to get this job now? You don't want to be in the position where you're negotiating out of desperation, or you don't want to be telling them that your startup failed, right? People would rather hire someone whose startup was going well, but you saw other signals, or you wanted some personal reasons, or there's a whole multitude of good reasons as to why you may want to quit your startup when it's doing well. They'd obviously rather hire a successful entrepreneur than someone whose startup did not make it, right? So if if that helps at all, it's far better from a recruiting and hiring perspective to quit a little too early than too late. All right. Now, I can't give anybody a specific time frame. Like you should do your startup for 2.5 years and hit X, Y, and Z, profitability margins, and then then you should quit, or then you should consider taking a break. It's going to be different for everybody. All of you are going to have different funding constraints. All of you are going to be in different industries. All of you are going to have different business models. All of you are going to have a multitude of things that are vastly different about your businesses and your individual situations, which is why there is no silver bullet answer that I can give you. However, what you're looking at here in this photo is that because it's different for everybody, the best way to tell when it's the right time to take a break is by setting milestones, very specific and actionable milestones that if you are not able to achieve, that is when you should consider taking a break or considering another option. Now, what are these milestones? How should I be looking at them? Don't worry, I got you. So when you're thinking about these realistic milestones that you should be setting up for yourself and for your business, there's 4 key areas. Now, the first 2, super obvious, right? I recommend you have some type of business milestone set for yourself at least every 6 months. At least every 6 months. You should have something tangible that you can measure and track towards at least every 6 months. You don't want time to go by too far where you lose track of things and it's too late to course correct and fix things, especially in a business that's evolving as quickly as your startup, right? Now, of course, number 2, finances. If you run out of funding, you can't support the lifestyle that you want anymore. You can't pay payroll. You can't support your employees. Of course, that's going to be pretty obvious. I don't think anyone needs to be told about milestones related to financing, but also incorporate those every 6 months or so. Track your budget, etc. Be realistic and give yourself some leeway, right? For those of you who are wondering how long it may take to get a job, so you can set yourself up financially and budget appropriately, depending on how long you've been doing your startup, but generally in this super competitive market where there's a lot of layoffs, even for like the top companies in all the different industries, it's going to take you a long time to get a job. Like if I had to guess, my guess is probably at least 3 months to find a job. Now you add on top of that you are transitioning from being a CEO running your own business into a corporation, you're going to add at least another month, maybe 2 months on top of that. So when you are thinking about these milestones and how long of a runway you have with your finances and your budget, you're going to need to account for the fact that it's going to take you 4, 5, 6 months to get a job, right? Now, your milestones also need to incorporate an element of listening to the market. And what I mean by that is you could have the best product in the world. Maybe you're going to cure cancer or send people to space, who knows? But listen to the market, because sometimes you may have the right product, but it's just not the right timing, or there's a bunch of other hurdles that you may be encountering. But you need to listen to the market and see, are you actually able to generate demand? Are you actually able to easily get investors? Are you struggling to get investors and seed funding? Or is it very easy for you? When you're doing your Kickstarter campaigns, how quickly were you able to reach or exceed your goals, right? Listen to the market and be realistic with yourself. I know all of you love your businesses. You treat them like your babies, right? Your children, but you need to set realistic milestones as to, okay, by 6 months from now, I need to have X number of engagements or X number of pre-orders or pre-sales, right? Set realistic milestones. And if you are not able to achieve them, then you need to consider alternative options. Now, this fourth one, though, is something I think gets overlooked all the time by entrepreneurs, because we've all been told, and rightly so, you are going to need to make sacrifices when you're running your own business. Running your own business is risky, but the reward is extremely high. But I think a lot of people will get lost on number 4, which is your personal life. This should be incorporated into your milestones. Now, of course, we want your business to be successful. I want you to achieve all the things on the first slide. I want you to get rich. I want you to be your own boss. I want you, I, I want you to achieve all those things, but not at the cost of people that care about you and that love you and that are a part of your personal life. So if you start to see your friends or your family or your children get negatively impacted by you running your own business, then you are going to want to make some adjustments, make some changes so that you don't lose some of those parts of your life that can also bring you joy. And think about your mental and physical health as well. Those should also be incorporated into your milestones at least every 6 months. So do a health check, do a mental health check, right? Make sure that you are doing everything that you want to keep yourself healthy and happy outside of your business as well. Because even if your business is successful, you want to make sure you have people to share it with, to celebrate with, to have these experiences. So these are the 4 areas you're going to want to focus on when you're setting your milestones. If your startup is still ongoing and you are still active in it, how will recruiters get convinced that you would really take the job if offered it? Well, number one, you do not tell recruiters that you are going to continue to do your startup when you are employed. Right. So from their perspective, you are transitioning out of running your own business where you've gained all this experience or you gained all this knowledge. You were able to achieve X, Y, and Z things. And now they get to hire someone who has all of this great experience and knowledge. They are not going to know that you are still working on your business because most companies, when you sign your employment agreement, you're not supposed to be having multiple jobs. Right. So basically, they're not going to know. Okay. Oh, let me take a quick drink of water here. Oh, spilled some on my laptop. Okay. This over here. Okay. So, what are some common reasons that startups may fail temporarily and you may consider taking a break? This is for number 3, right, in that slide before, in terms of like listening to the market. So, number 1, pretty obvious, you run out of money. Okay, easy. Everyone knows that. Lack of market demand, we covered that, right? Now, but everything below that, strong competition, or maybe just your timing to the market just quite wasn't right. For example, Google, this was like 10 years ago. They came out with the Google glasses, right? Where it was basically augmented reality. You could wear the glasses, you could see Google Maps, it would tell you exactly where to go. You could like take a picture of something, it would tell you what it was. It could translate things for you live on the glasses. This was like 10 years ago. Super amazing product, probably life-changing, still a good product today, even in today's technology landscape. But the timing to the market was just not right. It was super expensive. Nobody could afford it. People were like, I don't want to wear glasses if I don't have to wear glasses. This seems ridiculous. Why do I want to do all this when I can just take my phone out? And the glasses are so expensive. No, thank you. So it could be great product, just not the right timing to the market. Good competition. Maybe there's like some bigger company with better funding that came up with a very similar idea to you. They beat you to market. Just not the right time, unfortunately. Leadership challenges. I've been talking to some founders who have co-founders, or maybe you've got multiple rounds of investment. So now you have different VCs or other board of directors also providing you inputs or making you make certain business decisions. And maybe it's just not vibing anymore. You're having some leadership challenges. You don't agree with how they think the business should go, how the business should evolve, how certain business decisions should be made. That's one reason why you may want to consider taking a break or selling your portion. Not the right business model, number 5. And this is something I see a lot from folks who have engineering backgrounds, but no business backgrounds, is having a great product or the right idea, but not the right execution or not the right way to monetize something or not the right way to deliver this to to your customers. Or maybe in some cases, it's also not being able to build a physical product with the right resources to make it affordable, to have a appropriate profit margin so that this is a sustainable business over time. And some of this you can learn as you go along. Some of it you can actually catch pretty early, pivot and adjust, maybe move your suppliers overseas, reduce some of the features, make it cheaper, work on your price point, figure out what's too expensive, what's too cheap, right? How you can sell it appropriately. You can have time to adjust and fix your business model, but there are some times where just the wrong business model was chosen from the beginning and it's not set up for success. Number six, you could run into some regulatory or legal challenges for those of you who are doing anything with autonomous driving, anything related to AI, anything related to pharmaceuticals or food, right? You got to get FDA approvals. As a quick example, Uber and Lyft almost never actually became a real business, right? Because way back in the day, the US government almost didn't approve this. Because if you think about it, it's super risky. You are literally having a stranger pick you up from possibly your house. They know where you live. They're going to drive you somewhere. Who knows what can happen when you're in a stranger's car? What if you get into an accident? What if, they're a serial killer or something like that? We've seen all those movies on Netflix and things like that, right? There's so much legal risk around the business model of Uber and Lyft. They almost never actually became a business. And it's a great idea. As we all know, we all can't live without Uber and Lyft, right? How we get to the airport, how are we gonna get around after a night out, how are we gonna get home? But you could have a great business, but you just you just run into legal, like regulatory and legal challenges. There's a lot of these autonomous self-driving cars, and there's even some like autonomous planes companies that are being built on. All this relies on the approval of whatever government or country that they are in. If the government does not approve autonomous driving vehicles, then all the great technology that they've worked on is basically useless, right? So you could have all the right things, but just run into some legal challenges. And then the last one, you may just straight up burn out. And some of us have been there, even in a regular corporate job too, right? You're just burnt out from your startup, you're exhausted, and you are just ready to take a break. And maybe you need some consistent income for a little while. You can rebuild up your nest egg and then reinvest it into the business. I'm sorry they killed the product. Or which product is that, Aaron? Google Glasses. Yeah. Great technology though. But all right, now this is kind of what I think someone was talking about is how can you get rich working for a corporation? Yuck. Ugh. Have a boss again? Come on. Can't make good money doing that. So, as a recruiter in the Bay Area, I just want to give some of you a little bit of a sneak peek. I've got both the corporate jobs or non-engineering jobs, right? This is like accounting, marketing, finance, sales. Now, they're all going to pay slightly different. I think sales obviously has the highest variable because there's a commissions component to it. But everything else, finance, marketing, HR, they're all kind of within 10,000-ish dollars of each other. So yes, you could make a little bit more if you were in marketing than if you were in HR or whatever. But it's like in the grand scheme of things, it's not quite as big of a difference as some people may believe. And so this is just a quick snapshot of what you could potentially make if you were in the Bay Area, right? How I got these, not so much Glassdoor because it's not super accurate. It's actually based on the market data that I get access to as a recruiter. And this is not even at like the top corporations, right? This is like if you were working for, I would say like a medium-sized company in the Bay Area, right? Not even in tech. If you were in tech, obviously you'd make way more than this, but this is kind of what you could expect to make. Engineers, for those of you who are engineers, look at the right side. For those of you not engineers, look at the middle column. So you can actually make pretty good money working for corporations. Will you be a billionaire? Will you get to be Jeff Bezos? Probably not. Probably not. I think like Sundar, the CEO of Google, I think he only makes like 500 million a year or something like that. So probably won't become a billionaire. But you can still make some pretty good money. And for those of you who are wondering, like, or maybe you were thinking that the only way to get rich is to run your own business, make some pretty good money here. And also realistically, a lot of the startups that even when they get acquired, even if they go IPO, unless you're like one of the original founding members and you didn't have to do like 5 rounds of funding, you're probably going to make like millions of dollars, right? Which is still a lot of money. Millions of dollars is a lot of money. But, if you're like a principal level person or like you're a senior director type person, you could make a few $1 million in a few years just working in a regular corporate job. So maybe this is a little bit of inspiration for some of you. And for those of you not in the Bay Area, in the US, for example, Bay Area and New York kind of basically pay the same. And then the other next areas above that is like Seattle, LA, Chicago. They make roughly like 5 to 10% less than this. And then everywhere else in the country is like usually a 15 to 20% delta. I'm not too familiar with like Puerto Rico. I haven't ever done any hiring out there. I'm trying to see if there's anyone else from other countries. Um, or sorry, Costa Rica. I haven't done any hiring out there, so I don't know if this is accurate in Costa Rica. No, this is total package. Yep, this is total package. So total compensation. And some companies only have base salaries and bonuses. Some companies give you base salary, bonuses, and stocks. Some are just base salaries and stocks. So it would be total compensation. Staff engineer considered junior. Yeah, so I would say most traditional, like old school tech companies, like Intel, IBM, things like that. How it goes is like staff, senior staff, principal, senior principal. So staff is like not quite entry level because I think before that you start as like engineer is like your regular title. So if you were like a fresh college grad, you'd start at like engineer or like senior engineer or something. And then after that is like staff engineer, senior staff, all that stuff. Um, what are the base salaries? It'll depend on the company. Each company has different philosophies around should you give higher base, should you give more RSU, should you give more stock options. If you're working for like another startup, you're going to have probably like 50-ish% base salary, and then the rest of it is stock options. It'll just depend on your company. Now, the good news is if you are in 23 states, California is one of them, whenever you're applying for a job, recruiters legally need to share with you the base salary range for the role. So you can just ask them what the base salary is that they're offering, and then they would be able to tell you. But yeah, staff engineer is like somewhat junior, but it's not straight out of school. TPM or product manager considered. It'll depend. There's like junior product managers now. There's like technical program managers that kind of start off at like the mid-level. I'm currently trying to hire like a lead, like pretty senior technical program manager who would make close to the senior principal level. So it just depends on what type of technical program manager it is. And on the eng side or non-eng side, I see it housed in different departments in different companies. Okay, cool. What about the security architect? If it's I think that's more engineering, so probably on the right-hand side. Principal consultant level. Oh, so I used to work in consulting. Principal consulting level, you're probably like a director-ish, depending on how long you've been principal. Now, if you've obviously just became a principal slash partner, probably on the earlier side. If you've been like a partner, you're the managing partner, you're the regional partner, like you're pretty high up, probably looking at like the executive-ish level. I think like if you're a principal in a consulting firm, especially the bigger ones, I think you start off at like 500-ish K, and then obviously the sky's the limit. You can make million, 2 million plus, etc. So just kind of be based on what you think you make now as well. All right. So now we've covered when to consider taking a break, quitting, how to know if it's the right timing, no regrets, all that stuff. What jobs should you actually be applying for right now? Let's talk about that. So, quick pop quiz. True or false? As a CEO, as a startup owner, I do everything for my business. I do engineering, I do sales, I do HR, I do hiring, I got to do the marketing, I got to do everything. So I'm qualified to apply for all of these jobs. I can apply for HR jobs, I can apply for marketing jobs, I can apply for engineering jobs. I'm qualified for all of them. True or false?
False.
Two false so far. 3 falls so far. But come on, guys. Like I've done hiring. I had to post jobs on Indeed. I cold call businesses all the time. I know sales. I'm really good at it. Guys, I had to get funding. I can do business development for you as well. I've done marketing. I've done some SEO. I've done some Google ads. I've done TikTok vids. You guys see me doing the dances, right? I can do marketing for you. Okay, so everyone basically is saying false, right? Everyone is saying false. Now, you'd be surprised though how many people I work with who will tell me, Corey, I applied for 2,000 jobs this month. And I'm like, cool. What jobs did you apply to? Everything. I'm a CEO. I'm super smart, right? I can
Oh,
do
that's
everything.
dumb.
I can literally do everything, you know. But everyone here is like, no, false, 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 which is good. That's true. From a recruiting perspective, from a hiring manager perspective, unfortunately, you are not qualified to do everything. I'm not saying that it doesn't make you smart, but nobody in a general corporate job is qualified to do everything, right? You've obviously got a specialty. Some of you have had to do something a little bit more than the other, probably based on your previous background before you had your own company. And some of you may just not want to do everything anymore. Maybe some of you don't even want to do sales, even though it was a critical part of your business. I see Aaron has a question. Go ahead.
Yeah, this was related to, I think, an earlier question I was saying of where TPM was housed.
Oh, yeah. So
I'm
I
in
would say,
IC technical, but like I
like,
was like, which side of the quadrant is it in?
I
And
would
it's like,
say
oh, I could do all the
TPM.
things, but yeah.
Yeah. So I've hired TPMs. Their pay is closer to the eng side. It's not as high, but it's pretty close. So you'd shift more towards the engineering side for TPM.
Got it. Yeah, and I say that because it's kind of Jack or Jill Olive trees, like what you're saying, but I see it's more on the right side too. Cool, thanks.
Yep. All right. So now that we know that all of y'all should not be applying to every single job that you believe you're qualified for, let's talk about how to actually get a job. And I want to preface this. This is very important. And this is why I put it in caps. This is how to get a job really fast. Okay. Really, really fast. Now, this is not how to get a job that you would love. This is not how to get a job that checks all 100 of your boxes that you would want to quit your startup, right? But this is if desperation mode hits, you're out of funding, you got to buy diapers for the family, you got to pay rent. This is the fastest way to get a job. Now, obviously, if you have more time, you can do all these things and then be a little bit more selective. But I want to preface this. This is how to get a job as fast as humanly possible. So number one, this is your order of operations. This is what you need to be thinking about. Okay, in your startup right now, what is your main job? What do you spend the most amount of time on? What are you the best at? What are you, what would you say is your specialty? Like, what do people in your business come to you for? Like, what is your main role, right? That's where you can start. Now, if you've only been doing your startup though for like a year or 2 years, and the rest of your 25 years of experience is doing something else, then that's where you're going to look at number two. But if you've been doing your startup now 5 years, 10 years, that's quite a lot of experience, right? Like imagine you were working at a job for 10 years and you had an experience focused on sales or marketing or back end software development, whatever, right? Whatever your main role is today, that's where you should probably start because companies, recruiters, hiring managers, we like to hire based on recency, right? We'd like to hire based on recency because when we ask you, oh, tell me about your greatest accomplishment or tell me about a problem that you had to solve. If you're talking about a problem that was like 25 years ago, even if it was a good problem and you had a great solution to solve it, it's not even relevant anymore. So it's going to hurt you in interviews. So it's far better to leverage, if possible, your most recent experience as opposed to things that happened way, way long ago. Now, let's move on to number two, though. Let's say you've only been doing your startup for 2 years and you don't really have that much experience because doing like 1 or 2 years of doing something may not be enough to convince somebody that you're qualified to do that full time all the time, right? So then number two is think about where you got most of your pre-startup experience. Maybe you haven't, maybe you were a software engineer on the front end and then you wanted to do your own software startup, right? Then if you want to get a job fast, I'm not saying that it's a job that you're going to love because maybe you quit the job because you hated being a software engineer, but let's just say you wanted to get a job fast, then number two, your second priority should be thinking about where most of your pre-startup experience is going to be. Because when you're building out your resume, you need to think about how much experience you have doing something. Now, most companies will hire people or like to hire people as specialists as opposed to generalists. Unfortunately, in the current marketplace today, job marketplace, you are not rewarded for being a generalist and bouncing around and doing different things. Unfortunately not. Now, when you're at the executive level and you're managing large teams, it's actually very good to have bounced around and done a bunch of different things. But if you're not at the executive level, you kind of get punished for spreading yourself too thin and being a jack of all trades but master of none. And so when you're trying to get a job fast, you need to demonstrate that you are a master of something. And that's why you would go to number 2, okay? Number 3 though. Number 3, if you have management experience, meaning in your startup or maybe pre-startup, you were managing teams, managing people, you were doing hiring, you were doing firing, you were doing performance reviews, right? If you have true managerial experience, try to get a managerial job first. Because if you're able to get or apply for management jobs, you don't have to do as much technical interviews, both from the engineering side and from the non-engineering side, right? Because maybe you haven't done SEO in a while, or maybe you haven't done digital marketing in a while. You haven't like built a dashboard in Tableau in a while. You maybe haven't done all the Excel fancy formulas in a while, right? Index matching, all that stuff. So there's less of a focus on the interview portion if you're a manager because they care slightly more about your management expertise, right? Your team building, your leadership. So it can actually be a slightly easier interview for yourself if you actually have management experience. So try to apply for those jobs if possible. Number 4, which is very important, forego the ego. And what I mean by that sometimes in a realistic perspective is you may, depending on how long you've been doing your startup, you may need to take a lower title or level than what you were doing before. That's the reality of it, right? This is if you want to get a job fast. Don't yell at me and be like, no, I deserve to make more money. I don't want to take a pay cut. I deserve to make X, Y, and Z. I totally get it. But again, if you want to make a job fast, if you want to get a job fast, if you've been doing your own business for like 10 years and before that you used to be a manager level, it's going to be hard for someone to hire you again as a manager unless you have grown your business and you were basically managing large teams as well over the last 10 years. But if you were trying to run your startup as an individual contributor, sole proprietor for the last 10 years, it's hard to get another manager job right away. So you may need to forego the ego and take one step down temporarily just to get your foot in the door. Now, if they truly underleveled you, then you should probably get a promotion very, very quickly, right? And once you get your first job, it's like the snowball effect. Once you get your first job, getting your second one after that, super easy. You don't even just stay that long. Just be there for like a year or so, and then you can go somewhere else and get that promotion that you want, get that 20% bump, right? And then the last part here is what is the scope of your work today? And think about how that translates to either a larger company or another startup of some kind that you may want to go and work for. And can try to compare apples to apples and have a realistic view of your scope of work and how that actually would play out in their business given their size. So as an example, when I ran this workshop a month ago, there was a gentleman who ran a coffee, it's like a coffee farm for the last 5 years with his family. So it's a family business. There's only 3 of them. It's him, his mom, and his dad. And they grow coffee beans, they harvest them, and then they sell them to coffee shops in their local area. And he was doing that for around 5 years, right? So his scope of work is a small family-run business, right? He's only picking enough or like growing enough coffee to support a small town of like local coffee shops, right? So that's his scope of work. So does that mean he can apply to Starbucks corporate and be their manager of procurement for
Procurement.
coffee globally? Now, his job may match the job description, right? He's in charge of procurement, getting vendors, managing shipping, supplying, packaging of the coffee beans to his local coffee shops, right? So based on the job description, he is qualified. He meets the minimum qualifications of the procurement manager role for Starbucks corporate. But the scope of his work does not match the scope of Starbucks. right? Starbucks has to procure coffee beans from probably like all around the world, right? Different countries, different languages, all these, legal hurdles, obstacles, operationally, like you got to pick them, package them a certain way, send them to different distributors. There's probably like OEMs in the mix, right? The scale is different. So you also need to keep in mind your scope of work when you're thinking about what jobs I'm truly qualified for. Again, this is if you want to get a job really fast. I'm not saying he can never get a job at Starbucks. He totally can get a job at Starbucks if he wanted to. But if you want to get a job fast, this is the best way to do it. All right, let me look at some questions here. But since he has knowledge on each department, he can then be a product manager. It depends. Most product managers, and product manager is like a tech term, right? And because it's a tech term, most product managers, most PMs actually have engineering backgrounds. So if you have an engineering background, possibly. I've actually that's really common for like owners of startups. The easiest or closest job is probably like a PM, if you're looking to transition out of it. But PM is like a super competitive marketplace, right? You're competing with already existing PMs, and you'll be competing with people who just got their MBAs, and you'll be competing with other engineers who are trying to switch into the PM roles, and you'll be competing with TPMs and product marketing managers. So it's a super competitive market, but it would be probably like a really good fit. Do they make you whiteboard for TPM jobs? Some companies do. It depends. Yeah, because they want to test your technical expertise as well. Depending on what type of product you support, you may have to do some whiteboarding and some coding. All right, so I think we've got some time here. Does anyone want to volunteer and talk a little bit about what your current situation is, what your company is like, and then I can try and help figure out what type of corporate job would be a good fit. Does anyone want to volunteer? Thank you, Elizabeth. Why don't you go ahead and unmute yourself and give us some context. Talk a little bit
Okay.
about what your company is and what you kind of do mostly for your business and what you used to
Oh
do
yeah.
before your business.
Yeah. Thank you for having this today. So right now I run a series of tech pitch roast comedy shows, which I think a few of you have been at. And what we have at the show is early stage tech companies. They present their pitches and then they're roasted and asked questions by a panel of stand-up comedians and VC investors and advisors. So I've had with my friends 16 of these shows so far around the Bay Area and LA since November with an average live audience of 150 plus. So at these shows, we sometimes make money, sometimes lose a little bit of money, but on average break even. And I really love that. It's more of like a night job, but I'm looking for something else that can give me a more stable income as that hopefully grows or continues to go on. Before that, I also have experience around the same time I created a small little dating app which matches based on shared sense of humor, but I focus most of my time on the Money is Funny tech pitch roast comedy show. Anyways, so before that, most of my experience for the past prior 7 years was in technical recruiting. And so that's
Woo!
my main background. Great. Looks like you're a recruiter too. And I loved recruiting while I was doing it, but I've noticed more and more recruiters that I have known over the years being laid off or these roles being discontinued. So I'm looking for creative ways to maybe move into a new opportunity, but also apply my background. I have a triple bachelor's degree, a master's degree, but I'm not sure how much that matters or not. So that's, and also a fun fact, I'm an Olympian. I competed in 2018 in freestyle skiing. So I love,
Amazing.
yeah, thanks. So I feel like I've helped build communities, especially with my show. It's a great way for VCs, investors, founders, comedy fans, others to meet each other. And I'm looking for a way to help continue to build community, help continue to connect people but also help contribute to a growing company.
And how long have you been doing your comedy shows?
So I've been a stand-up comedian for 2 years, and I've been producing my own shows for the past year.
Sweet. Okay. So it's been about a year of running your own startup so far.
Correct. Yes. Uh-huh.
Awesome. Okay. Super cool. First of all, I think we should all check out her show. If anyone's in the Bay Area or LA, that sounds amazing. That's awesome. Okay, so in terms of like getting a corporate job, let's start with the boring thing. She could go back to recruiting because she's got 7 years. 7 years is a lot, and if she's only been doing her own business for 1 year, which means recency wise, the 7 years of recruiting actually is still very valid. Now, of course, she doesn't want to do that anymore because of the potential job instability. And I agree. The pros and cons of our job, and one of the cons is that we are the first to be let go, along with marketing and sales, obviously. So that is one of the downsides of being a recruiter or just working in HR in general. So, but that's the boring, safe answer is she could get a tech recruiting job, but she doesn't want to do that anymore. So let's think about what she could be potentially qualified for. So outside of recruiting, in general, even if you didn't have your own startup, I've helped people move from recruiting into either sales or other parts of HR. Whether that could be like core HR, like an HR business partner, an HR generalist type role, or compensation, or diversity, equity, and inclusion. There's quite a few things within just HR itself that you're qualified for. You could also try to get a job in sales. Sales, though, also probably slightly safer than recruiting from like a job stability perspective, but probably also one of the first areas that companies will be looking at to make reductions in force. But sales is also another option. Very, very highly transferable skill set. And we actually see people go back and forth from recruiting to sales and vice versa. Now, if you didn't want to do that, how do we leverage your startup experience? Based on what I'm hearing so far, it sounds like you're an awesome event organizer, or you do like event marketing or social media marketing, whatever it takes to get the 100 people butts in seats consistently over time. You may be able to springboard that into some type of like entry level marketing role, or if you want it to be like an event planner, like corporations have event planners, and I know in the Bay Area they start at like 6 figures. So that's also something you could consider as well if you didn't want to go back to like HR or anything like that. But also, if your only concern is job stability, there's quite a few companies that are actually hiring right now for recruiters, and some of the large tech companies actually just haven't done layoffs, right? Like Apple has not done any layoffs that anyone has known of, at least. And like SAP only did like a 1% reduction in force. So there are some companies who actually are relatively stable. Is it advisable to not say in CV you were co-founder? Generally, yeah, which I'll talk about in 1 second. Yeah, NVIDIA, they have not done layoffs either. Super competitive company to get into, and they pay extremely well. All right, so we covered all those things. How do we get hired? Now that we know when to potentially quit, what types of jobs I should be looking at, how do I actually get this job? And that's kind of what someone was alluding to here in terms of what do you put in your CV. So how are you actually going to do this? Number one, you should let people know that you're thinking about taking a break in your network. I know everyone's going to freak out right now. Everyone's thinking, oh my God, everyone's going to think I'm a quitter. Everyone's going to think I gave up on my dreams. Everyone's going to think my startup is a failure. I'm a failure. Not true. Not true. And also, you're not going around being like, I'm quitting, I'm not good at this, I'm quitting, help me. No, you're just going to start telling people that your business is going great, you've been able to achieve X, Y, and Z, but there's some personal things that are happening, or you want a little bit more stability. You're getting really stressed out. You're feeling the burnout, even though you're making good progress, and you're considering making a change back into corporate, right? Start to build your network up again. Check back in with your former bosses, your former colleagues, your friends, right? Start to rebuild that network, put some feelers out there, see how valuable you are in the marketplace, what the appetite is for people. I've also seen people actually get hired by some of their investors, or some of their folks who work on their board of directors, or people in the VC space. Maybe if you've done a few successful IPOs or acquisitions. Maybe you could get like a board of directors role or like some type of consulting role for companies. But just start to put feelers out there, because I've coached people who have just started to have conversations and then the doors just started to open up, especially if you've got good relationships. You never know what can happen, but you don't need to like go out and tell people that you're quitting. They're not going to think you're a failure. Remember, 90% of startups fail, and it's all about how you word it and how you approach it, which again is why I talked about it's better to start to quit a little too early than a little too late, right? Because it's easier to say, yeah, things are going good, but for personal reasons X, Y, and Z, I'm thinking about making a change, as opposed to, hey, I ran out of funding, man. Like I got to pay the mortgage. Like, you got anything? Right? Far, far easier. Of course, number two, pretty obvious, update your resume. But how do you do that? Well, based on what we talked about so far, think about which job you actually want to target. I highly recommend you only focus on 1 or 2 jobs to start with. So you're going to need 2 versions of the resume, one for each type of job. And you're only going to put the relevant experience for whatever job that is on each version of the resume. And that also means, look at number 4, your job title matters a lot. Now, the good news is you run your own business. So you have the ability to be a little bit more flexible with your job titles. And you want it to be as close to the job title of which you are applying to without lying. But you can get very close to it, because again, you run your own business and give yourself whatever job title you want. For example, if you want to be a product manager and you weren't a product manager before, okay, but you want to be a product manager because you were an engineer before, and then you had your own startup and you were trying to build your own app or whatever, sure, you're now qualified as a product manager. Absolutely. You meet the minimum qualifications. Should you just say you're a CEO? Probably not, because when they're doing the SEO optimization, the ATS system, it's looking for people whose resumes say product manager. And when you put CEO or co-founder, that doesn't hit that checkbox, so the ATS system will be like, reject, moving on. But you could say you were the director of product management. You could just put product manager if you wanted to. It's your own business, right? You could put VP of product management. You could put VP of product, right? There's lots of ways that sound, or lots of job titles that are adjacent to the job that you want, that's going to help optimize you for the ATS systems. But again, looking at, remember number 3 though, everything that you put on the resume needs to be relevant and focused and tailored for the specific job that you want. That includes all of your previous pre-startup work experience as well. Which is why, again, I was like encouraging people, if you got quite a bit of pre-startup experience doing something, that's going to be your strongest resume, right? Because if you can only put relevant stuff on it, which again, as a recruiter, I'm telling you, we only care about your relevant stuff, it's going to set you best up for success. But when you are building your resumes, everything needs to be highly customized and tailored for what you're doing, which means when you're talking about your startup, if you're applying for a product management job, everything that's on there needs to be focused to product management. So you don't need to talk about how you got funding. You don't need to talk about business development, right? You don't need to talk about how you had to hire people, right? Those things are not related to product management. Similarly, if you're trying to get back into an engineering job, everything on your resume from a startup, and I've been working with some founders the past month, everything on the resume when you're trying to get a engineering job again from your startup needs to be highly technical, right? Talk to me about the front end, talk to me about the back end, talk to me about how you built certain things, talk to me about all the different tools that you had to leverage, talk to me about all the APIs you did, talk to me about the complexity behind it, right? Tell me about the different software languages and the different tools you had to learn while you were doing your startup. That's when you can highlight your technical expertise. Again, don't care about how many customers you had, don't care about how many rounds of funding you had, don't care about how many people you had to hire and interview, because this is an engineering job. Okay. So wait, do we put something like co-founder and CTO? No. Your job title needs to match kind of what you're applying to. So nowhere on there should it say co-founder and CTO. Because also if you put CTO, that's way too senior for a product manager type of job, right? So you would just give yourself the job title of like head of product management or director of product management or something closer to like whatever scope of work that it is that you're applying to. La, 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 la. I had friends that say remove that and add head of product management. Yeah. And I would beta test it, right? Like apply for like 10 jobs with head of product management, see if you get hits back. Ideally, you want to run a 10% response rate. If you're not getting it, then just put product manager. You're not lying, right? So, all right. So now the final obstacle is getting past the hiring managers and the recruiters. Of course, their main concern is you were a CEO, you ran your own business, you were your own boss. How are you going to operate in a team environment? So be ready for those non-technical behavioral questions. Tell me about a time you had a conflict with a teammate and how you resolved it. Tell me about how you would give feedback to a teammate, right? All those teamwork related questions. Those are going to come up. They happen all the time if you're a CEO trying to get back into corporate. Why are you looking to switch? Pretty obvious question that's going to be happening. Again, much easier to answer this question quit too early than if you quit too late. But you're going to want to have a good answer that's not focused on anything around you, right? This is like the whole why do you want to work here question. To answer why you want to work here, they don't give a shit about why you actually want to work there, right? They're paying your bills. They're paying you a salary. They don't really care what you get out of this. They care what they get out of this. So your answer as to why you're trying to switch is, hey, I had all this great experience doing X, Y, and Z. That's highly relevant before my startup. Then I did my startup, which I was successful at. I was able to raise funding. I was able to build a prototype. I was able to get interest. I did a successful Kickstarter campaign, whatever, right? But by doing my own startup, I gained additional skills that are highly relevant for your job, like A, B, and C. So now you take the fact that I have these 3 new skills from my startup, plus my awesome pre-startup experience where I was a high performer. You combine all these together, and I'm looking to switch now because I want to have a huge impact in your larger corporation, or I want to be able to help you achieve X, Y, and Z, or I read your company's mission and it aligns very closely with mine, but I can do it at a bigger scale with better resourcing, whatever, right? How you are able to help them. That's your answer as to why you are trying to switch. You don't need to say, I failed. I ran out of funding. I need to buy diapers. I need healthcare. None of that matters. It's why you can help them. Of course, managers are also going to know, as a CEO, you have to do everything. So what are you actually good at, right? They're going to be probing your knowledge to be like, hey, are you lying on your resume, right? Like, did you over embellish some of these accomplishments that you claim to have had? They may even, and this brings us to the last point, do reference checks. And it's actually pretty common, especially if you were a CEO, because there's no one that can actually vouch for you and like prove that everything you're saying in your interviews about your company is correct, right? So that's why they're going to do reference checks. So make sure you have them ready. Start to check in with some of your former managers. Maybe you've got some vendors or suppliers, former consultants that you hired for your business, some of, your board of directors, co-founders, whatever. But you are going to want to get your references ready when you're serious about applying for jobs and you're actually getting traction, right? You don't need to tell anybody about this until you're actually starting to do interviews and you're at like the on-site stages or you're later on in the process, but you are going to want to make sure you get your references tightened up. All right. So I think that's pretty close to a little bit over the top of the hour. Yep. All right. So I'm going to open it up for Q&A here. Anything that you thought I was going to cover but didn't cover, feel free. If anybody wants a free strategy session with me, 30 minutes, please sign up on my website, careershakers.com. I'd love to help you figure out how you can potentially transition into a regular job. If you have questions around like, should I even be taking a break right now? What type of job should I look at? I'm happy to help you. But all right, feel free to use the chat function, come off mute if you have questions for me. Yes, I do. Full service. What do you say about those looking for jobs in AI? Super competitive. It's the hottest market right now. Like unbelievably competitive. I have degrees in it, 5 years going back now, always a continuing education. That's going to be tough, to be honest. 5 years is it's a long time. Now maybe if you have a PhD, if you have a PhD related to it, you know, and like numerics, algorithmics, I have degrees in it, 5 years going back up to now. Oh, going back up to now. Oh, then yeah. Yeah. Depends on what your degree is in though. I would say a lot of the AI roles are like, you know, they're looking for folks with PhDs, masters generally at a minimum. Some people with bachelors who have done like if you can do like anything related to machine learning adjacent stuff, so like data science roles, machine learning architecture roles, software architecture roles. If you've done relevant hands-on research, or maybe you've gotten some research papers, patents, things like that, would be relevant. Yeah. So I think if you could get the job, it'd be awesome, but it's so competitive right now. I would apply for AI jobs, but I would also look for adjacent roles as well, like data science, data engineering, anything heavily math based would also be like a good what's the word, like transition role to get into AI later on. What about prompt engineering on GPT AI? I'm not too sure what that means. If you give me more context, I'd love to answer that one.
I answered for JR.
Okay, cool. Can we keep extending the employment last day to the current day rather than having plus 2 months gap? What does that mean? Can we keep extending the employment last day to the current day? Can we keep extending the employment last day to the current day rather than having plus 2 months gap? Plus 2 months gap. Oh, I think you're saying on your resume, can you make it look like you're still employed at the company when you're not? I think that's what you're saying. No, I would not do that because it's going to come up in your employment check, background check. So I wouldn't do that. But to work around that though, on your resume, you don't have to put months. You can just put the years that you were at certain companies. So that should give you a little bit of flexibility. 11 months of flexibility actually. So okay, cool. What other questions come to mind, everybody? Aaron, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just curious if you've seen more product management or TPM sort of roles around AI startups. I've seen quite a few where the starting is like 300K at Anthropic, but some companies just cut out the PMs generally because they just want individual contributors to own the product. I know that's how it was for like WhatsApp and Instagram. So I'm just curious to see like what your take is on that.
So in general, companies only start to look for TPMs and PMs. Well, it's TPM first and then PM generally. PM comes second. But it's only as the product or the team has developed and grown big enough in which it makes sense to actually have it. TPMs, your main role, right, is to coordinate cross-functionally across multiple different either engineering groups or departments or external vendors, suppliers, licensees, etc. And you're generally not at that capacity until you've reached like a certain engineering mass. So it'll just depend on the size of the startup or the AI company and when they're at that level of maturity to get a TPM. So it just kind of depends on like how big they are and how fast they're growing. But I do think it's a good indicator of the potential trajectory of a startup, right? Like if they're posting like a TPM PM role, it probably means that they've grown or they have enough of the engineering infrastructure built out where they're now requiring someone to actually do all that coordination. So it's probably like a very good sign. But again, if you want to get a job at any AI company right now, it is like the most competitive place to ever try to get a job in. because it's like the only thing that Wall Street likes right now, right? If your company literally says the words AI in your investors meeting or your quarterly update, your stock price goes up like 10%. So it's like the most competitive thing right now. In applications, they ask for month and year. My last month was March when I quit the startup. That's not too far away from now though. Like March is like not that far. And there's like a bit of a it's kind of like at the beginning of COVID, right? When there was all these layoffs from companies that couldn't do anything fully remote and so many people lost their jobs, right? It was like a freebie almost. Like if you said you were out of work since March of 2020, like there was no questions, no one batted an eye. They literally were just like, must have been COVID, not their fault, right? And so now it's also very similar. Like if you say you lost your job January, February, March, April this year, it's kind of very similar, right? It's like they were probably in tech, wasn't their fault, you know? So I wouldn't worry about that or have that imposter syndrome given the current state of the market. Oh yeah, and physical health also like super important. Oh, this is a juicy one. All right, let's see how, okay. How would I leverage my SRE/DevOps background along with co-founder product infrastructure and platform engineering? Exciting, okay. While pitching for why you want to join us, what would be the potential right response to that question for making a career change? So the first, well, many things to unpack here. So you've got 10 years of SRE and DevOps. That's a lot of experience, actually. How long have you been doing product infrastructure and platform engineering? I think it would depend on how long you've been doing one or the other. That's probably one thing that comes to mind. But just to answer the question, 8+ years. Oh, okay. So you've got 10 years DevOps, 8 years product infrastructure and platform. I assume product infrastructure and platform is the most recent. So that's probably the roles you're targeting, right? So while pitching it for why do you want to join us, what will be the potential right response to that question, making a career change? Now, in my opinion, though, you're probably not making a career change anymore, right? Because you already made the career change when you ran your own startup, because now you have 8 years of product infrastructure and platform experience, I assume, unless you're now trying to switch again, in which what are you trying to switch to? But if you're not, you've already made the career switch, right? So now your answer actually is just like your standard, why do you want to work here question, as if you already have a lot of experience, which you do. You have 8 years, and all of it is engineering related, which is great. And so you just need to talk about how you've got 10 years of SRE and DevOps background, which allowed you to learn X, Y, and Z relevant skills for product infrastructure and platforms. And then you co-founded and ran a successful startup where you were able to achieve X, Y, and Z, and you love the product infrastructure and platform engineering side of things, and you've realized that you've already been able to achieve X, Y, and Z, but now you want to do it at a larger scale. I'm trying to switch to principal level SRE. Oh, you want to go back to what you were doing before. Interesting. I don't know. I mean, I'm not hired for SRE and DevOps, so I don't know how relevant the platforms engineering experience is. I guess from a technical perspective, you'd have to like tell me how much overlap there is, but a principal level is pretty senior. And generally, companies wouldn't hire a senior principal or like a principal level person if you haven't done it in a while. That's my first reaction, but I don't know how similar they are. Like if there's a lot of overlap, then it's possible, but senior, but a principal level role is pretty senior. Like some engineers don't even make it to principal level before they retire. So that's pretty high. Okay, so in your previous role, you were a senior staff. That was 8 years ago. Yeah, but I gotta be honest, like if I was hiring somebody as a principal level person and I found out you haven't done it for 8 years, that would be tough. That would be pretty tough. I'm sure you could get a senior staff role again. But yeah, that's gonna be tough. There is some good overlap in my previous role. I mean, I guess at a principal level, if it's an IC, if you could pass the coding interviews and demonstrate the depth of knowledge that they need at principal, that's possible. I think it's possible. But I don't have enough like experience on like the DevOps space to probably give you a good recruiting answer there. May I ask, how do you think about the job market what about the job market after LLMs? What is that? What is that?
Large
LL.
language model
Oh,
is
large language
talking about
models.
like ChatGPT and
Okay.
NLP jobs.
How should we choose major or career paths since I am CS and data science related people? I honestly, I think you should pick what you're passionate about. I don't like when people choose jobs based on like what's hot right now and like how to make the most amount of money. I truly believe you should just do what you love, and the market will change and shift over time. For example, hardware engineering has not been cool or sexy for over 10 years, right? Silicon Valley has been all about the software. Right now, the hottest jobs are hardware and silicon engineering because who's getting laid off? Software engineers. Why? Because their skill set is highly flexible and you don't necessarily have that much of a demand and there's an extremely high amount of supply. What there's not a lot of supply of is hardware engineering, mostly because a lot of the hardware jobs require advanced degrees and masters because you can't learn enough in your undergrad in electrical engineering to actually be qualified to build like a GPU or a CPU or an SoC for like a Qualcomm or an Nvidia or an Apple or a Google, right? So everybody who was in hardware when it wasn't cool 10 plus years ago, they're making more than software engineers make now, and you still get to do what you love. Another example, automotive engineering. That has not been cool since like Ford was like an awesome, cool, sexy company, right? When Tesla first came out, Elon Musk was paying like senior automotive engineers from like Ford and GM crazy amounts of money to help him like start Tesla. Rivian is paying automotive engineers crazy high salaries to help them like build up their supply chain, like build out their electric vehicles. So people who followed their passions and did what they love, you will make your money eventually. Like as the technology landscape shifts. So I would say choose what you love. But if you love LLMs, then I don't know, both get a PhD probably. Do we need to have an objective slash summary in our resume if we have one? Oh, if we have one on LinkedIn. Okay, the first answer though. Do you need an objective slash summary on your resume? Everyone needs a summary, but you don't need an objective. Everyone needs a summary, especially if you're switching careers, industries, going from startup to corporate. Everyone needs a summary. Should the one on LinkedIn be the same as a general resume? Yeah, I guess you could. Guess you could. Yeah. The main thing your summary needs to have though is like years of experience that you're doing whatever it is that you're applying to that's relevant. Your industry slash product area of expertise. And then like some key differentiators about yourself. That's what your summary generally needs to have. And that can work on your LinkedIn. Could that work on your LinkedIn? Yes, it could. But again, you only get one LinkedIn, but you can have multiple versions of the resume, right? So on your LinkedIn, you're going to want to have to choose the one job that you're like most interested in and like build your LinkedIn brand around that one job. So if you did EE, definitely good pass in terms of majors. What I wish you did, got you. How you teach the co-founders come to you for switching. Oh, how I teach them. So the first thing that we work through is like, okay, what jobs do you want versus what jobs are you qualified for? And then bridging that gap. Hopefully it's the same. Sometimes it's not. And then figuring out, okay, what's the career plan that we need to build out for you to help you achieve either X or Y. Everyone's got different timing constraints, financial constraints. Sometimes we just need to get a job ASAP. Sometimes we have more time and flexibility, but we can build out a career plan from there. And then it's like, they're going to have questions around resumes, LinkedIn. Interviews is actually the biggest barrier, is like, how do you address some of the concerns? How do you handle, and maybe some of you haven't done an interview in like 10 plus years, right? How do you get back in the groove of interviewing, common questions, all that type of stuff. Alrighty, cool. Wow, we actually filled almost all the way up to 10:30. I don't think that's happened before. Great questions, everyone. I'm going to give it like one more minute, and then we will basically be wrapping up and calling it a day. Any other questions?
So is this your own like consulting business as a recruiter?
No, I have a regular job as a recruiter during the day.
Got it. Cool. Thanks.
Okay, no other questions? Going once. Going twice. Sold. Cool. Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate your time. I will be ending the recording and then editing the video, uploading it. All of you should be getting an email from me with the slides sometime today. And then the recording will most likely go probably next week to the YouTube channel afterwards. And you'll get all that in the email that I'm be sending out to you. And then I believe this is a monthly series that I'm going to be running on that meetup group. So tell your friends if you thought it was helpful. Give me some feedback as well, what I should be adding, because it's a monthly series. So I'm gonna be working on the content, adding and removing things that people find helpful. Alrighty, thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
Thanks. Nice session. Have a great day.
Thank you so much.